Hey, Marlins fans. Welcome to a new edition of Big Fish, Small Pod here on the Fish on First podcast channel presented by MPT College Consulting. Getting really close to the end of this minor league season, unfortunately. About a month away from all of the affiliates from AA on down finishing up their season. AAA goes a little bit longer than that. Only so much time to enjoy these guys, for them to change our opinions, and for award winners to distinguish themselves every single year across the minor league system, handing out awards for each affiliate as well as the organization overall. In my opinion, the race for minor league player of the year, the best position player performer in this organization, is a two-horse race as we get down to the wire. So let's dive in on both Joe Mack and Javier Sanoja and how they stack up head to head. If you're watching on YouTube, you have the stats right there that I've lined up between Joe Mack, who's been a catcher most of this year at AA Pensacola, Javier Sanoja, shortstop, second base, center fielder, wherever you need him for mainly AAA Jacksonville this season. It's a really close comparison across the board. Joe Mack leads this Marlins organization with 19 home runs with 66 RBIs this season. Javier Sanoja leads the organization with 121 hits and provides a lot of value with his versatility and even his base running from time to time. He has the big edge in batting average, a slight edge in OBP. Joe Mack has the edge in slugging in that department. And both of them have been healthy, thank goodness, throughout this entire season. Both of them just 21 years old here this year, playing against older competition, particularly in Sanoja's case. Let's take a little bit of a closer look at how these guys have performed and how they've changed their perceptions this year for the better in both cases. Starting off with Joe Mack, because he was the one making waves early on this year, right? He was coming off a really frustrating, disappointing 2023 campaign in high A. The Marlins had him repeat that level initially, and it took a lot of people by surprise that they very quickly bumped him up to Pensacola after just 2 weeks at the high A level, put up great numbers, and those are partially reflected in his overall stats. For the vast majority of the season, he's been in Pensacola, the youngest hitter on that AA roster for this team. And at times, he has been amazing this season, particularly during that month of June. He hit 10 home runs in a single month. I really don't think there has been another Marlins minor league catcher in the organization's history that has hit 10 home runs in a single calendar month at any minor league level, much less while facing older competition throughout this year. He's just been really good offensively across the board. Now the batting average has come down at AA, only hitting .237, but while playing in one of the most pitcher-friendly leagues in the entire minors. As we'll get back to at the end of the show, if you look at the head-to-head comparison, the raw numbers seem to slightly favor Sanoja, if not very close, but the league-adjusted numbers tell a different story, because the Southern League overall, it has a league-wide batting average of .234, an OPS of .667, really hard to get hits of any kind and to hit for power in that league, whether at home or on the road, and that makes Mack really stand out even more. The fact that his OPS is in the high 700s. It's a whole 100 points ahead of the league average this year for Mack. As a reminder, he came into the organization as a highly regarded draft pick back in 2021, signing bonus of $2.5 million back then. And at this point, what we're seeing this year is measuring up pretty close to how he was valued as a prospect. His only defensive position he's played is catcher. It looks like he's going to stick at catcher. He's throwing out 38% of attempted base stealers at the AA level, while also deterring them from even stealing in the first place. Only 60 attempts against him in 52 games as a catcher at AA. If you want to put a knock on his performance, it's been no doubt helped by the fact that he is DH'd for a significant portion of the season. He was splitting time evenly between DH and catcher at Beloit. Since moving up, it's been about for every 2 games that he DH, he catches 3 games. So that routine has basically been, they play 6 games a week. He catches 3, he DHs 2, he usually gets one of those off. And that's been the routine for him this season. Only 1 error. And I know there's not a whole lot of errors involved in catching, but I think that just speaks to the consistency of his throws behind the plate as well. That's where you generally accrue most of your errors. 5 passed balls overall, not a terrible number for that sample size. there's not much doubt that he's going to stick at catcher, and that in itself is a whole lot of value for this team, considering that even a guy that we have ranked ahead of Mack, for example, on our top prospect list, Agustin Ramirez, there's serious questions about him defensively, even if we think he's a better overall prospect because of his bat. So Mack, on the most recent update of our Fish on First top 30, he is number 14, and he'd be a whole lot higher if not for all those trade deadline pickups that the Marlins got. I think 6 of them ranked ahead of him, so he would be a top 10 prospect in this organization, in our opinions, if the previous talent level was still the case. And even so, one of the better catching prospects they've had, certainly put himself on the map after not even being in our top 30 entering the 2024 season. It's been, for him, even more so than Sanoja, I would say that Mack has changed his perception, especially on the offensive side this season for this organization. So now moving over to Sanoja, he is number 16 on our current FOF top 30 list. These guys almost right next to each other on that list, and they have very different profiles, as we touched on. With Sanoja, his standout skill is his bat to ball skill. He has by far the best strikeout rate in the AAA International League, under 6% this season, and everybody else is in the double digits. There's a couple guys at 11, and then everybody else 13 or higher this season. It's mind-blowing. It is naturally, as a Venezuelan player with these kind of bat to ball skills, there have been those Luis Ariz comparisons flying about. It is shocking that he is doing this at the AAA level, so facing even older competition than Mack has been doing after spending most of last year at the low A level. You see relief pitchers, they can move this fast if they have a lot of success, go from like low A to AAA within a calendar year. For Sanoja to do it as an everyday player, there's just very little precedent for how he has been accelerated through the system so far this year. He actually started the year at AA. Within a couple weeks, moved up, and that promotion was even more surprising than Max because he wasn't playing super well those first couple weeks of the regular season. He had a slash line of 246, 279, 316, a sub 600 OPS. Even in that, as we touched on, a very pitcher-friendly league, he was well below average as an offensive performer. I thought when they moved him up to Jacksonville, it was only temporary, that they needed a body in that infield to fill the gaps due to injuries. And he has, after getting off to a relatively slow start there at Jacksonville, he has taken off. And the consistency from the month of May onward has been obscene. It was an OPS near 900 in May, and then in every month since then, comfortably over 800. He had a single month. I want to make sure I got this right. I think it was the month of July where Sanoja it was in the month of June. In 26 games, he struck out one time. 26 games, more than 100 trips to the plate. The consistency has been alarming. Alex Carver, a Fish on the Farm, just touched on it recently. Over this last month, he's been reaching base just about every single game. And the versatility is valuable. To start the year, when he first got up to Jacksonville, he was splitting time between second base and shortstop pretty evenly. And as the year has gone on, there have been times where they've needed extra bodies in the outfield. So played some center field in mid-May, and then he cycled pretty evenly between those 3 positions throughout much of the summer. Then recently in Jacksonville, Victor Mesa Jr., back injury, out for the season. Jonathan Davis released. And because of that, and also some of the guys they've had to, Dane Myers, of course, out due to injury. With all those bodies down, center field has been his primary position since the final days of July. I would say that is his least proficient position. Second base, probably the best. Shortstop, better than I would have thought entering the year. I just refreshed myself on some of his shortstop defense right before recording this. He looks pretty solid out there. It's an average-ish arm for a shortstop. Not just for any infielder, but for a shortstop. And the accuracy of his throws, even when his momentum is taking him away from first base, even when he's throwing from the outfield grass all the way to first base, it's impressive for a guy that we should mention, for anyone that doesn't know, 5'7". He's about as small as any player in this entire organization at any position. So that's going to give him some sort of limitations when it comes to range, and it gives him a limitation in terms of power, to be clear. So it's 7 home runs. I'd say most of them have been wall scrapers that you wonder how many of those are actually going to go over the wall in the majors. it's still such a delight to watch him because he makes contact with everything, because he has more plate discipline than I think people give him credit for. He's drawn 42 walks this year. It's a walk rate of nearly 10% and a significant uptick from last year, where I remind you, he was playing at A ball most of that year at low A, a little at high A at the end of the year. For him to just improve across the board in his production this season while facing so much older competition than he did a year ago, it's awesome. It's a really awesome story. It's the lack of power that still makes me question what his upside is. He still has to show that his above average speed translates into extra runs. He hasn't been a really efficient base stealer so far in his minor league career. So those are questions that hopefully he'll address at the big league level, if not by the very end of this season, then certainly early next season. Sanoja getting very close to tasting that. Once again, pulling up the head-to-head comparison for those watching on YouTube, it's really even across the board. Sanoja has the momentum at this moment. He's been continuing to play great into August, whereas Mack, really since the start of July, his offense has fallen off quite a bit. And so it's been less consistent as of late. And if it continues on that track, I think Sanoja is going to steal it. It's certainly easier publicly to reward a guy that has a high, that gets hits. Even if you adjust for the league conditions, and Mack has that significant edge in terms of weighted runs created plus, a 135 for Mack versus 110 for Sanoja. It's the overall volume of production might lean towards Sanoja at this moment. So I think he's the slight favorite right here in both cases. Just to be clear, both of them drafted, signed, and developed homegrown Marlins prospects in these cases for an organization that has had so much trouble having homegrown position players that are worth much of anything, that have any sort of success in the minor leagues. To have them both break through at the same time this year, it's been very refreshing for the Marlins to go ahead with all the other talent that they've brought in from outside the organization over the last couple of months. So take a closer look for yourself. Joe Mack versus Javier Sanoja. Let me know who you think has the edge. Still a month left for Mack at the AA level. And with Sanoja, that season goes on a little bit longer at the AAA level before his stats are final right here. So still a lot of room to go in this race. And I think it's going to come down to the wire right here. It's a fun problem to have for the Marlins organization to have both of these guys doing so well here in 2024. I've been Ely Sussman. This has been Big Fish, Small Pod on the Fish on First podcast presented by MPT College Consulting. Check them out, mptcollegeconsulting.com, to check out their services and schedule a free consultation. Thanks as always for listening, and go fish.